All right, well, welcome to the general meeting for the month of August for the Central Texas Association of Black Social Workers. Thank you so much for attending. I am Dr. Sharice Bell, the president of the association, and I'm joined here with other officers. We have Trinia Cooper, who is our membership and engagement chair. We have Marie Hines, who is our marketing and social media chair. And then we have Jamie McKinney, and she is our secretary. Thank you so much for joining us today. Candid Conversations, talking about critical race theory. And Trinia Cooper is actually going to be leading us in this conversation. But before we go there, I really would like to have everybody introduce themselves, just kind of say your name and how you heard about this discussion for today, and maybe where you're coming from or who you're representing. So if you don't mind doing that, let's start with Lisa, even though Trinia already kind of gave us your introduction.
I was excited. I'm happy to see her.
Good morning. My name is Lisa Walker. As Trina said, we were childhood friends. We're still friends, church members. I am an assistant principal at University High School, and I was actually invited by Trina. Didn't really know anything except for the what was on the flyer about what the conversation was about, but it really sounded like an interesting discussion was going to be happening, and I didn't want to miss it. So thank y'all for inviting me.
You're welcome. So whoever wants to go next, feel free.
My name's Deborah Schaefer, and I was invited here by Trinia Cooper. I've read some about critical race theory, but I am not well educated on it. So I wanted to get some more information.
Whoever would like to go next.
So I'm Tony Austin, or TA, and I think I was referred by Ms. Cooper and Ms. Hines, and I'm a big fan of anti-racism, and wanted to join on today. So
Thank you so much for joining in. I see we have Dr. John Singleton with us. How are you? It's such a pleasure to see your face. Haven't seen you in a while. Thank you so much. Virtual hug.
All about it. All about it. Thank you for including me. Thank you for letting a white face be represented here to continue to learn from you and with you. This is such an important conversation. I don't know how our nation has twisted critical race theory into this monster that people have made it out to be. It is vital to understanding our past, our present, and our future. And I'm just honored to be here. Thank you. I'm the Dean of the Social Work School at Baylor. I know most of you. Good to see you all.
Good to see you too. Thank you for joining.
And nice to meet some new people.
Yes.
So we have two others, Alan and I think it's Mato. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Alan Roberts. I am in my final year at the University of Texas Steve Hicks School of Social Work. I learned about critical race theory all last year.
Awesome.
And it is very interesting, like Dr. Singler, am I saying your name right? Singletary was talking about how it's twisted and the narrative has been changed and it's been politicized, which is disheartening when you really understand at the core roots of what critical race theory is getting at. Long story short, I received the email. I have time before we begin my final semester in studies. So I figured, hey, this would be a great opportunity to meet new people and really, just be amongst the circle.
And certainly share what you know.
Yes.
You studied it all last year, and then you definitely have something to contribute to the conversation. So do not be shy. No one, please don't be shy about talking today. All right. So I'm hoping I'm saying motto correctly, saying it correctly, but do you mind introducing yourself?
Do they have their mute on?
No, it could be that there may be an issue with audio because I don't see
Audio.
the mute button on. So there could be.
It may be Trunda Oliver. I know she's driving, so she just may be listening in. I don't know if she's able to comment or not. I'm not sure. Some people will be doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, feel free to introduce yourself whenever you are able to. So what I would like to do at this point in time is turn the meeting over, give it over to Trinia. She's going to take our virtual platform and lead us in this discussion today. So take it away.
Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for coming to our first webinar of the year. We're a little behind, but we are here. Thank you for coming. I want to welcome members, new people coming. You know, when we were thinking about a topic for this, you know, we were kind of throwing around things and we thought about having a speaker, not having a speaker. I said, well, you know, why not? Let's talk about critical race theory. It's a hot button topic. I don't think everyone is educated on it. Hey, Ms. Pat Miller. Ms. Miller's here, our county commissioner.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again.
Well,
Try
thank
to
you.
invite all past guests, you know, just so we can have an open, candid conversation. And so I have found a video to kind of get us started, to kind of look at it from MSNBC. Joy Reid interviewed the lady that coined the term. And so we're going to look at that video. And I also have an outline that we'll discuss. And we're just going to get into a rich conversation. No question is a dumb question. The end goal is to educate and not to settle for what the media says or learn for yourself about things. And I think that people are being misled on this theory. So I'm gonna share my screen and we're gonna take a look at this video and then we can get the conversation going. I have a small outline, but wherever the conversation goes, if you wanna add, you wanna engage, you want to debate, a healthy debate, we can do that. Let's get started. Where is it? Okay, I'm gonna start from the very beginning.
Some of you may be wondering, what's the deal with the GOP freak out over critical race theory? It's everywhere and was even used as a GOP call to arms at a conservative Christian conference last week.
The old Marxism used economics to gain control. The new Marxism uses identity politics. And the result is something that looks nothing like America. There's no reason to believe that this new Marxism will result in anything but what the old Marxism resulted in.
Critical race theory is racism, pure and simple. And it should be rejected by every American of every race.
And let me tell you right now, critical race theory is bigoted, it is a lie, and it is every bit as racist as the Klansmen in white sheets.
Okay, but here's the thing. None of this is random. This is the result of a highly manufactured strategy created by seasoned political operatives looking for the perfect wedge issue to take back power. Something to combat the energy of the multiracial coalition that took Georgia, and something to replace Blue Lives Matter, since January 6th exposed that slogan as a sham. Conservatives in Congress took note and started chattering, which was then ingested into the feeder system of Fox News. The tagline disseminated and the war against critical race theory took off. No one wants a boogeyman near their kids, and certainly not in their classrooms. The operatives know this. Those fears got played up, and now along with the fear of trans kids taking over junior high handball, parents are fighting with school boards in cities and towns across the country over curricula that they believe teaches white kids that they are racist. None of this is actually happening. But who cares about a little old thing like the truth when you have the perfect campaign buzzword for 2022? It even has the magic word in it, race. Joining me now is Kimberly Crenshaw, co-founder and executive director of the African American Policy Forum, and the legal scholar who coined the term, critical race theory. So it is your fault, madame. I tripped over the curb this morning and I went, critical race theory? Damn you! You tripped me on the call. It does everything bad. I mean, and the cicadas, y'all really need to stop with the cicadas critical race theory. That was not nice.
We can throw everything in the bag, everything in the bag.
So I just wrote down a few of the notes of what people are calling critical race theory: Marxism, racism, bigoted. Let's start with the Marxism. That's their favorite one. They're using that every single time. And I hate to ask dumb questions, so please don't think that I'm dumb. Is critical race theory Marxism?
Look, you know what? Here's the thing, Joy. Critical race theory is not so much a thing. It's a way of looking at a thing. It's a way of looking at race. It's a way of looking at why, after so many decades, centuries actually, since the emancipation, we have patterns of inequality that are enduring. They are stubborn. And the point of critical race theory originally was to think and talk about how law contributed to the subordinate status of African Americans, of indigenous people, and of an entire group of people who were coming to our shores from Asia. And the point was, quite frankly, to understand the problem in order to intervene in it, to understand why the greatest hopes for our republic were not being realized, even though these hopes were encoded in law. So critical race theory just inherits the beliefs and the hopes of Frederick Douglass, of Martin Luther King, who basically want the law to do for the freed people what the law did for enslavers. And we picked that up in the 70s and 80s after the civil rights movement to say, okay, so now we've had this big civil rights movement. We have all these laws in the books, but things really aren't looking as different as they should if we are really the society that we say we are. So we put about the task of understanding how law wasn't just the neutral referee. Law wasn't always on our side. In fact, law was less on our side than on our side. And we wanted to tell these stories in order to do better with the promises that are embedded in the Constitution. That's what's in critical race theory.
So is critical race theory, is there a K through 12 curriculum that right now is being taught? I'm sorry, I know it's a dumb question, but is there a K through 12 curriculum on critical race theory that's being taught in schools around this country?
Well, look, Joy, if it was news to most Americans that critical race theory was in K through 12, it was news to me too. I'm one of the co-authors of one of the few books on critical race theory. I think I would know if we were being taught in K through 12. I mean, basically, critical race theory, classic critical race theory is a law school course. And it's really, not taught as widely as I would hope it would. Yeah. But here's the deal. This is not about whether anything called critical race theory is in K through 12. What they're calling critical race theory doesn't exist anyway. It is a backlash effort to reverse the racial reckoning unlike any we've seen in our lifetime. And as you pointed out at the beginning, they can't say, we're for racism. They can't say Derek Chauvin should have killed George Floyd with his hand in his pocket, looking like he was completely without a care in the world. They couldn't say that. So they looked around and found a strange sounding theory that they could put all of the grievances and resentments in and mobilize people around this boogeyman. And if our side can't really understand what's going on, it's going to work. It's worked in the past. It worked to end Reconstruction, and it can work to end this reckoning too.
And a gentleman named Christopher Rufo, who's very vigorously requested to be on the show. We're gonna take him up on it and let him come on this week and invite him on. He literally said, we've successfully frozen their brand, critical race theory, into the public conversation and are steadily driving up negative perceptions. We will eventually turn it toxic as we put all the various cultural insanities under that brand category. To wit, Fox News has mentioned critical race theory nearly 1,300 times in the past 3.5 months. And we've now discovered that a lot of these parents that are showing up at school boards, inveighing against their children being taught that they're, racist, turns out they are actually Republican activists, not just regular old parents.
Big surprise there, right?
Yeah, it is not surprising at all. So I guess my last question to you would be, what do you worry is sort of the purpose of what they're trying to do? Because this is political. It is about getting out the white voters in 2022. Is there a bigger risk to naming critical race theory as some sort of Marxist plot?
Well, of course. I mean, the biggest risk is that this tried and true framing of anti-racism as racist against white people is going to win again. It won at the end of the Civil War when civil rights were framed as reverse discrimination against white people. It won after Brown versus Board of Education when integration was framed as damaging white children. And it could win now if people don't wake up and have a sense of what's at stake. So yeah, you're going to hear all these stories, cherry pick stories. Turns out a lot of them were not verifiable that the other side is putting out there. You're not going to hear, and you should, what is happening with these bans. You're not going to hear that an essay by Ta-Nehisi Coates was the reason why a school teacher was fired. You're not going to hear about the affinity groups in colleges and universities and the programs, the educational programs that are being canceled. So we need to see materially what this is doing in order to weigh into this. If anyone was mobilized by last year, if anyone is concerned about what they saw on January 6th, then you are on our side with this and you need to get involved.
All right, hold on one second. All right, you guys, hold on. All right. So let's wake up. Let's wake up. Let's talk about it. I thought that it was very interesting. So did we have a clear understanding of what critical race theory is? I'm gonna pull up a true definition that I found. And it says critical race, am I sharing my screen? I'm not, am I? Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Hold on. Which one? Okay. All right. So I found a definition of it, and it's saying critical race theory is an academic concept that is more than 40 years old. And we figured that out. The idea is that race is a social construct and that racism merely is the product of individual bias or prejudice, but also something embedded in the legal system and policies. The basic tenets of critical race theory, or CRT, emerged as out of a framework for legal analysis in the 1970s and 80s, created by legal scholars. So I wanted to open that up to you and see who has some thoughts. I'm gonna bring up our outline of what we will discuss today. Who has some thoughts on it? So now that we have a clear understanding, it's not being taught in our schools. It is a law theory, and it is being used, as they said, as a boogeyman to the Republicans to rev up their base. And so I said, we will define this theory, discuss why the GOP is used as a platform in public education. We did the clear definition, and is it affecting schools? Does anybody have some input on that? And just kind of the basis of how it's being as this boogeyman between the Republicans and the Democrats. It's not being taught in schools, and it's a way to just oppress our history. And no, I don't think anyone has really read it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to me, as it relates to the politicians trying to, I guess, make sure it's not taught in the schools, there seems to be a youth movement, and many of our young people who may be of European descent are not going in that same route. They're not traveling that same route that a lot of their parents, grandparents, and as far as sharing those ideologies. So it almost seems like with the fight against quote unquote critical race theory that they're trying to keep this youth movement thinking the same way that they think, so that's just my personal opinion.
Right. And that's dangerous. They're using that theory, which has nothing to do, they're using that theory to whitewash our history. And, to be honest, I just found out some history that I didn't know about just in the past couple of years since this awakening that we've had of civil rights and social justice. I want to continue to learn. Why take this out of our schools? And they're using this as a basis to whitewash our history. I think that it's very dangerous. What are some of your thoughts on this?
Alan has his hand raised.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Allow me to add this as an extension to the definition. It deals with deconstructing institutions.
Yes.
And when you look at deconstructing institutions and you look at deconstructing history, and you really get a better understanding of how and why it is so important and fearful to a certain population, with the fear of losing control and power. So critical race theory is essentially saying, look at history. And when you look at history and you look at the founding documents of these United States, it's within the document as a core, it shows that we were 3/5 of a person. So when you look at just the foundation of which we all are based upon, critical race theory is saying you cannot ignore the fact. And then when you look at how institutions, economic, religious, et cetera, are built upon these false narratives, critical race theory forces you to look at it from the truth. And that's why there is so much fear and so much anxiety behind this being taught per se in school, which is teach history for what it really is, the truth of history. And that's not being taught in the education system, at least since I've graduated.
Right. You're right, Robert. And so as some of us are social workers, we work in systems and we see the oppressed. Who else better else to discuss this? Anybody else have some input?
I was just going to say this is just kind of a basic point, but you know, I have a son, he's 22 now, but later in school, you know, I let him know, I said, you know, there's a lot of Black inventors and that have made significant contributions, and that's still not being taught in schools about the contributions of, you know, Black, you know, inventors and what this very significant contributions that have been made. And I was reading an article and I posted it on Facebook about, you know, famous Black inventors. And it's amazing in a negative way that this has not been a part of our curriculum for our children and our youth growing up, and even in colleges. You know, unless you go to a Black college and you know, you have that education. So I don't know. I just think it's really unfortunate. There's so much of our history that is being erased.
Not if I can help it. You know, in my community, I mean, I even had a thought. I just like, okay, COVID, go away, so we can on Saturdays we can teach Black history. You know, it's nothing to pull up and teach Black history, and it's out of fear, and it's about power, like Robert said. What's some other takeaways that as our guests that you have?
I feel like a lot of parents are uncomfortable, especially when you have to deal with your own prejudice or your own racism. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to erase history to do that, because I don't feel like it's about pointing fingers. It's more about trying to reckon so we can get to equity, fairness, and justice.
That's right.
A lot of people don't see it that way. They're just scared of what it brings up. And I think they feel like their kids might feel a little guilty, or I've read that somewhere, like some of the European descendants might feel guilty from the past. I don't know, to me, it's just like a lot of excuses, but I'm looking at the other way that they might see that. That's why a lot of parents are probably nervous about it.
Right. Ms. Miller, your hand is up.
Well, good morning. And first, let me apologize. I love to join Zoom meetings because it allows you to see people, even although we're socially distancing. But this is truly a Saturday for me. So I'm going to leave that picture up. But please know that I am so glad to be here. I tell you, as a public official, it is alarming to me when we place in public policy, being a democracy and being one of the pristine democracies in the world, where we would attempt to place in public policy any modifications or changes to our educational systems. I think, and I'm so glad that you all as a social work organization are looking at the impact to our community and to our society as a whole on what this says on the grand landscape of things, because it is extremely alarming when we start making shots at our educational system and start determining what as a nation we are going to teach our young people. What I found enlightening, because I saw that Joy Reid segment when it aired, is that in the state of Texas, we are drawing attention to something that is not happening. According to scholars, we're not teaching critical race theory in grades K through 12. It is, as they said, a post-secondary course, and I'm glad it is, because I think at that level, our scholars do need to drill down and look at America's history through the lens of racism so that we can affect positive changes moving forward. I think that's the basis of a growing democracy. So when we look at the sinister way that the state of Texas is looking at critical race theory and how we placed it in the environments of the public school system, we need to look at the insidious way that we have groups of people that, instead of us coming together as a nation, instead of us learning, understanding, and feeling for one another, we consistently continue to have groups that would only create division and wedges. And I think that's the sinister and scary part of this whole movement.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And let's just be real. Let's just be transparent and be honest. Our history is ugly. It's not comfortable. It's you don't feel good looking at it. There are some ugly things, and of course, we don't want to go back and rehash that. But in order to move forward, people of color have had a hard time in this country and continue to do so. Yes, we've made strides, and I'm proud, but it doesn't look good. And so we're running away from problems. I mean, in the world of sociology and social work, we teach people how to go through those issues. We give them the tools to face that. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at today, is looking at this. Any other input before I'm gonna ask Dr. Chevelle to share this caption she showed me. And it took me a minute to hone in on it, but does anybody else want to share their feelings? Hey, Pam.
I'm gonna give a quick comment.
Hey, Pam.
Okay. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, just a quick comment. So I don't know a lot about critical race theory, but I'm an educator and I've also been a student. And so I will hypothetically ask the question, how many of you all had Black history when you were in school? And so I think that the state or government has always told schools when they adopt textbooks, what they're going to teach about the adoption of the textbooks. But I think one of the reasons that we're here is because we have a lot of pushback now from parents, social media, people who have seen what's being taught in school. So we celebrate things like when we're studying Christopher Columbus and we're studying him in a positive light, and people who know the truth start saying, but wait a minute, that's not actually it. That's what's being taught in the textbook. So more exposure, maybe with social media about what's being taught and the angle from which it's being taught is probably what shed the light on the narrative being told from just one perspective, and with other people wanting it to be a wider lens. I think that now people who are in, I guess you could say, leadership politically, they want to make sure that the narrative remains the way that it always has been. They don't want that change because of fear. And I agree with Ms. Hines, because of the fear of maybe it will make some students feel uncomfortable, or it would cause division in schools. Kind of like when, and I don't know how old you all are, but when we looked at Roots for the first time I was in elementary school, and kind of some of the feelings that it led, and some of the, I'm not going to call it division, but just a disruption of the learning environment, a minute disruption of the learning environment, I guess you could say. And that's kind of all I have to add.
Yeah. That's right, Lisa. We were shocked. If you can remember the first time you saw Roots, it was kind of like, take your breath away, and let's take it a step further and bring it into the 2000s, 12 Years as a Slave. It took me a minute to get myself together after I saw that, because it was real and it was raw, and our history is not pretty. It's not. In order for us to get through this thing, we've got to look at that and walk through it together as one. And that is our goal. If we just start our little community and then spread this conversation, these are the conversations we need to have. We don't need to be yelling. We don't need to be screaming. We need to be intelligent and have intelligent conversations and learn to agree to disagree. And so that is what I would hope today. Now, I'm gonna ask Dr. Sharice to share her screen. She saw a post in an article, and we want you to look at this image and tell us what you see. Because it took me a minute. And you're on mute.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Trinia. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was just saying, I want her to share, because at first she said, tell me what you see when you see this. And I made, some little slide comment. And I just didn't see what she was saying. But the more I looked at it, I was like, whoa, okay. So we want to challenge you today. Look at this image and tell me what you see. And it all ties into critical race theory, race, social justice, oppression. And just look at this that she found.
Can you see it?
Can everyone see this? Look at the signs.
Can you see the image?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right.
Tell us what you see.
Yeah, what is it that you see? And feel free to openly say what you see. Just
white people.
You're following.
That's what I said, John.
Because that was the first thing that she said. Yeah.
White women specifically.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah.
Don't beat the Trinia. Just let people see. Let people take it in.
Okay.
No. Does it say no to wisdom?
Yeah.
Why are you saying no to wisdom?
It does. And that's the thing. When I shared this with Trinia, I saw that when I saw the story, and this is an educator was coming out of the school at the end of the class day and was bombarded by protesters. Now I believe this is not the educator. I can't remember who specifically this is, but I think this is someone who kind of came in and said, hey, educator, just go ahead and go home. I'll kind of take it from here kind of deal. But they bombarded the educator as they're coming out of the school, trying to go home at the end of the day. And they had their signs, they were chanting things, they were saying, and this happened in Tennessee in June, the end of June. This happened in Tennessee. And they have these signs, but what I stopped on was what I saw in the image, not so much the story, but what got my attention was what was on the signs. And so Dr. Singletary, you went right to what I went to. And I was like, are you serious? So this sign here, say no to CRT, say no to wit and wisdom, is what stuck out to me. Because it says more than just, we are opposed to this theory being taught to our children, although it's not. It actually says to me that there is a lot of underlining things. This is just the cloak. CRT is the cloak. basically to other things that's going on. And one of the things is, this need to keep the populace deceived, to keep the populace, not giving them the opportunity or even encouraging or nurturing critical thought. Critical thinking has been taken out of a lot of, school curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
And this idea of thinking critically is what gets us to challenge a lot of what we are experiencing, a lot of, our policies, our laws, a lot of what we're hearing. But if we're not thinking critically, then we're kind of gonna be as robots. We'll just, do as someone say do and not question it, not think about it. We'll take anything as truth just because it came out of the mouth of someone who we have deemed to be trustworthy or credible at some degree. And so when I look at this sign, to me, it is a perpetuation of a need for a populace to not be critical thinkers. So this idea of saying no to wit and wisdom, there's no association between CRT and wit and wisdom. Is this making sense?
Yes, you are.
So when I look at the sign, the first thing I thought was, what do the two have to do with each other? And then I thought to myself, okay, the last portion of that sign has nothing to do with CRT, but it has something to do with what they're using CRT to do. And that is to continue to perpetuate the need for a populace to be ignorant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You see over here, for the most part, no CRT, educate, not indoctrinate, no wit and wisdom. This over here, you can't see it because the dress is in the way, but I can imagine it says wit and wisdom must go. What is the purpose of education? When students go through their educational programs, we're teaching them, a number of things. So by the time they get to college, we want them to be exercising their critical thought skills, critical thinking skills. We want them to think critically. We want them to unpack, the knowledge that we are wanting them to be exposed to. We want them to question it. We want them to see it from every angle. We want this, not to just take things, at face value. We want you to think about these things and, muddle these things and come to your own conclusion, make sense of these things for yourself. But if we're talking about no to wit and wisdom, then we're not going to get the diversity of perspectives that we need in order for everyone to be able to have conversations like we're having today. If we all on this earth thought the same way, did the same thing, said the same thing, what kind of life would we be living here on this planet? So I look at this and I think about this idea of CRT plus other things, the 1619 Project, all these things that are being, protested against. The underlining is not so much the thing. The underlining is the fact that, number one, it's exposing what is true, because we don't want you to know the truth. We want you to continue to, take what we say and just believe it, and not question it, but just go with it. Because now you're falling in line with whatever the agenda is for you not being in the know. Mm-hmm. But you not being in the know is throwing a monkey wrench in our agenda, and we don't know what to do with that. We don't know what to do with, people knowing the truth. But then also at the same time, I think, Marie, you brought this out. The truth hurts. The truth hurts. And when we're talking about, decades, long, more than decades long, but you're talking about, a history of a country that has been built on a whole slew of lies. And then to come to knowing that what you once believed is not the truth, it's painful because it's almost like my identity has been framed according to what I thought I knew. And now I have to grapple with whether or not I am who I say I am, because the truth that I once knew is not the truth, is actually a lie. So there's some challenge with having to know the truth and work through the emotions that knowing the truth comes, brings forward. But once you work through those emotions, you now have to decide, how am I going to move forward? Who am I now going to be? How am I going to shape myself now? And now, because now I have to figure out what the truth actually is, because what the truth is not what I thought or what I was told. So now I have to figure out, how do I move forward from here? And that comes with a whole nother set of emotions. And it's not a good thing. We don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't want to feel those uncomfortable emotions. And if we already don't know how to manage our emotions, if we are already out of control when we get into those uncomfortable spaces, those uncomfortable internal spaces, when we're having these emotional presentations that don't feel good, right? If we are already not knowing how to manage that, don't know how to cope with that, then when we're coming socially, getting all this stuff that's triggering, emotions, it creates a space for us to do and say things that are not, as becoming as we want them to be. So I think this topic of, just dealing with racial injustice altogether is going to create an emotional response or emotional reaction for everyone. No one is outside of having emotion when it comes to this. Emotion to the truth, emotion to the pain of having the experience or having ancestors experience, experiencing things that, we particularly don't wish they had not, experienced. We're helpless in a sense because there's nothing that we could have done in order to change the situation or circumstance for our ancestors. But that's the case for everyone, whether, the ancestors were the perpetrators or not, or they were the victims. On both sides, there is emotion. So I think the conversation, although this is a dividing, factor, this CRT issue, the dividing factor, I think the conversation really needs to be, not a blaming or an attacking kind of conversation. We really need to figure out how we can come together, and process through our thoughts and process through our emotions, and not necessarily look at each other as, the boogeyman or the bad person or this or that, but take to consideration that we've all had experiences, and none of the experiences are altogether positive, because at the end of the day, we are human together. It doesn't matter what color you are. It doesn't matter what your cultural background is. At the end of the day, we're a human together. And so how can we, in light of all of the truths that we're unpacking, how can we take all these things and move forward for the better of all of us, all of humanity? How can we work together and promote, laws or policies that don't oppress, one group or pit one group over the other, but, move us all forward? And you talked about fairness, we talked about equality, equity, and all those things. How can we do that without looking at each other without demifying each other? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then also without trying to, keep us, ignorant and keep our children ignorant. I don't think that's the way either. So those are just my initial thoughts, but I want to hear from you all in terms of your experience of this image, or your response to this image.
Well, I feel like they might as well protest in front of a library, because you're saying don't read, no wit, no wisdom. You could look the stuff up and educate yourself, so to speak. So I'm just not understanding how they put the two together, as if you're saying CRT, you shouldn't have wit and wisdom. Like you want to keep us in the dark and the Stone Age. And all it is teaching us the past so we can learn from it, not necessarily repeat it. I'm just confused as to why so many would be against it.
There was a saying that I used to that was repeated all the time around, when I was young. I heard my mother say it a couple times. I just heard it a lot. If you want someone, if you don't want someone to know something, put it in a book.
That's right.
Put it in a book. And we can have another conversation about that, but you say, you can educate yourself, you can, but what I'm finding is, we don't want you to read a book. We don't want you to educate yourself, although there's, knowledge is everywhere in terms of its accessibility and that sort of thing. It's like, we don't want you to read that. We just want you to just listen to what I say. Just listen to what I tell you and just take that and that's it. No need to look it up. No need to read a book, no need to research nothing. It's not, don't waste your time. Don't waste your time. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was saying just listen to us and put a spin on it, but go ahead, I'm sorry.
What was you about to say, Tony?
No, I was just gonna say, in reference to the question she's asking, what we think about the picture. Unfortunately, these also some of the same people that probably think COVID is not real. So I'm serious. I mean, it's kind of hard to kind of take people serious.
Right.
They're protesting things. So,
because there's an acceptance of a level of ignorance right now where we can sell you this swampland, and tell you this instead of you, the individual, seeking knowledge and finding out. And I refuse to just listen to media or someone. And I was telling Dr. Chabelle, I go read. Something awakened in me when I was in college. I'm sure you guys, I want to study it, or I want to know what's going on. I heard about peer review, listen to the professionals, listen to science. And so it's just this turn that our country is making about the truth that's really, to me, is hurting our kids that are growing up. They're looking at adults act like this. And, it's just really, really dangerous. And I'm so thankful that we could come together and have this conversation, and just really delve into what's really going on. Is it really about critical race theory, or is it an underlying thing? And I think no wit, no wisdom. So just dumb it down. You don't need to read. I would be ashamed. They should be ashamed that this is. I should make this go viral. This is a shame. Any other thoughts?
Well, I think you have to have context behind. For every, how can I say, for everything you look at, you kind of have to know the context. So, kind of in looking at this picture, I wanted to know, okay, what is this really saying? So I just did a quick search to find out what was going on. What's the backstory for this? And so what I did find out is that Wit and Wisdom is a curriculum that's in Tennessee, and it's kind of like Chutes and Ladders, like just basically the name of a curriculum that they have. Just kind of looking to see, okay, what is in this curriculum? It looks like the curriculum exposes students to things that these were some protesting moms in Tennessee, and that Wit and Wisdom is the curriculum in Tennessee. So they're opposing that curriculum. Because, like you all, I was trying to figure out, okay, what do they mean by Wit and Wisdom? Are they saying Wit and Wisdom in general that they don't want students to have? So whatever is in this curriculum, I guess you could research more. I did add the link in where I found the information, but not justifying this or anything, but just saying, I think that it was more of a curriculum, and not really sure why they're questioning this curriculum or opposing this curriculum. But I think it's for the same reasons that, so this is a movement in Tennessee. We have a movement in Texas where Texas politicians don't want students to know anything about, I'm not going to say know anything, but don't want a particular perspective to be taught. I think we kind of have the same thing going on here. So just not really, I'm just not really sure about the underlying issue here. I did share the link where I found the information.
Thank you. And I appreciate you for saying that, because after seeing this, I had to do some looking as well. Because seriously, because I was confused. And I think I brought it, we were in a meeting and I mentioned it, and I was livid. I was like, what kind of foolishness is this? But you bring out a good point. You have to look at, get the context. Because if you, for instance, did not look further into this to get a better understanding of what that wit and wisdom was all about, and that is a part of their certain part of their curriculum, then you could have taken this anywhere you wanted to take it. And I think that's another part of the debate that we're having too. I should say the noise that's happening right now is that there are a lot of, misunderstandings that are being, amplified, in ways that are not healthy. And I think that's part of, where we're going with this whole critical race theory. I mean, it's gotten to the point to where people are having, congressional meetings, and, we got, people going to court for various different things. And it has just, there's this big, heightened hypersensitivity to CRT. But I think part of it is, as you said, not knowing and not understanding the context of not just CRT, but even some of the statements that are being made, or even taking some statements that are being made and, creating something else outside of those statements. So that was the point that I wanted to make. Thank you, Lisa.
Jamie, were you gonna say something?
I was just gonna say that when looking at the photo, I think the first thing is I feel overwhelmed, at least for that person who's talking in the purple dress. But then also when you look, I think the first thing I thought when I was looking at the signs, I didn't see wit and wisdom first, but I kept seeing, indoctrination. And I was like, oh, they're confused. And they think that these people are just teaching their children how to believe in something specifically. And then I thought about what Dr. Chevelle, and then also what in the clip you posted from SMBC was talking about, we are getting things so, of course, politicized, but by the time it's on for these people who are on the front lines and they have misinformation and they think that everything is about skewing beliefs, when like Trina has said several times and Dr. Chevelle has said several times, it's about educating about history and just giving fact. And these folks are confused and thinking that critical race theory, which is not even presented in that way to their children at this whichever school, is to teach them how to believe a certain way. So now they have to feel a certain way. So it just makes me think that by the time it comes down, like the trickle down effect to the boots on the ground, people have it and they're rolling with it. It's just kind of seeped so into, I don't even know how to say, they're like fiber of their being, and they're so upset that it's just so difficult to change minds. But I do also think that it is an education thing where we have to self-educate. And that is difficult. Like what you said, what your mom says, if you don't want people to know something, put it in a book. I agree. Even with things being so easy at our fingertips, as far as let me search, that wasn't happening. And I know a lot of people that I spoke with initially when Texas was posing the bills to change things based on the movement away from critical race theory, that nobody knew what it was. People hadn't even looked it up. They just thought it was bad. And so it's in their minds that it's just people are trying to push belief systems. And I think that goes across further than, multiple states.
That's right.
I think that, yes, ma'am. I think that's a very interesting point that she makes. When you think of critical race theory, at its core is the idea that race is a social construct. And if you think about that, what they're saying is that race only exists because we say it does. It's man-made. We've created the subgroups of race. There's nothing that's in the Bible, that's nothing that's biologically founded. It's a social construct. And racism is not just my individual prejudices or biases, but racism, if you look at it through the lens of critical race theory, is also embedded in our legal systems and our public policies. And that's the point that I pulled out that Jamie was speaking about. We get our public policies from our future policymakers. So if you start teaching young people K through 12 to not even want to hear the term critical race theory, to not even want to engage in a conversation about different races and how we're all equal and how humanity, blends from one group to the other. If I make you tone deaf in public school, when you get to a college campus where you should be having those critical conversations, you'll already have shut down on that. And that's what I think is so insidious about this attack at the public school level and so dangerous about it. Because we're going to have those conversations that critical race theory brings out if we're gonna grow as a culturally diverse democracy. We're gonna have those conversations. So if you make it where I don't want to talk about it, where I don't want to know about it, where I think that word is bad to me because you want me to feel bad about myself, we won't have open conversations. We won't get to see more continuous movements like we saw with the George Floyd protest. What I was so taken aback was the culturally diverse groups of Hispanic, white, African-American, Asian, and very young people who were marching because they have grown up at a time where they have friends that are all shades and they know that people are just people. And they just intrinsically, like we did, felt that just was wrong. In that dynamic, you can reverse that thinking if you snatch out the fact that at the public school level, that kids should come to an understanding that everybody's the same, that we should all treat each other with respect and not have this cloud over their heads. And so I just can't say enough how insidious I think the movement is and how dangerous it is that we are seeing an attack on our educational system.
Yes. And I think platforms like ours are vital to understanding. I feel like we should have more people in this in this Zoom, as much as we advertise this, but people are afraid to talk about it, or they think people may have an agenda. I was thinking with my group of ladies, social work sisters, I call it, let's chop this up. Let's talk about this in a mature fashion. We're all educated. And the majority of us are social workers who work in public life. And we work in systems and we see the oppression on different levels. I think this has been such a great conversation. Does anybody else have any thoughts or?
Dr. Singletary has his hand up.
Oh, yes, I've been waiting for you.
I don't know about that. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for this. And like you just said, I honestly am disappointed that we didn't have more students. I know it's the first week of class and students are tired, but I really was hoping some of our students would be here today. That just means you're going to have to come to our campus and do it in our building pretty soon, Trinia.
That sounds fun. Come on,
yeah,
let's do it.
Right? We need to do it.
Yeah.
It's also disappointing. It's disappointing, it's saddening, and it's aggravating how hard this is for white people because of the emotions that Dr. Chevelle is talking about. We don't want to get emotional about this. We don't want to look in the mirror and say, my grandparents contributed to this. I'm a result of a legacy that has contributed to this. That's so hard for white people to say. Black people have to say that. I mean, you can't deny. I mean, you were talking about roots and 12 years of slavery. You can't deny saying my people were affected by this. I've been affected by this. But for some reason, white people think we can just not say that. We think we can just pretend that everything is good, that American history is pure and beautiful and spotless. And for some reason, I'm not even kidding, we convince ourselves of that. It is part of whiteness, is that we convince ourselves George Washington was all beautiful and Thomas Jefferson was all beautiful. And, you know, all 45 presidents are all, you know, all those white men have been, except for that one black man, but we, you know, we even pretend he wasn't there. You know, we pretend they were all bold and beautiful and good. And perhaps a lot of what they did was beautiful and good. But Lord knows they did some bad things, and it affected us in so many horrific ways. And white people just cannot bring themselves to say that. We think we're selling each other out. Right. We think we're, you know, it doesn't do any good. My dad says it to me all the time. It doesn't do any good to feel that guilt. You know, why you want to shame yourself like that? I'm like, why? I don't necessarily feel shame for it. I feel it is just awareness that brings responsibility that can help us do things better. We can't get to the point where Dr. Chevelle was, of saying we were all beautiful people in this together, if at the same time we can't look back at our history and say we made some mistakes. Yeah. We did some things that were hateful and harmful. And it's true in the education system, it's true in politics, it's true in the church. Yeah. You know, we don't want to say anything bad about the church. Well, guess what? The church killed Muslims because they wouldn't accept Jesus as their savior all over the world. And that's horrific. The church did some bad things. They killed people for disagreeing with one another. Yeah. And, you know, I'm not betraying my faith to say that. It's just, you know, and I went to seminary, so we learned critical theory, not critical race theory per se, but critical theory at seminary. And it was just a way of saying it's okay to look at the criticisms against the church because the larger culture has them, the larger society has them. If you're preaching, people are going to bring those criticisms to you and you need to be aware of them. Well, that's true in all of society. We need to be aware of the criticisms against our country and against our people. But for some reason, there are no, you know, so few white people that are willing to. So instead, we create the boogeyman. I mean, this is so good, Trina. You know, because we're not willing to be honest and critical and own the power and the abuses that have been a part of our history. It's you know, it's just being honest. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean I hate white people. It doesn't mean I'm turning against my people. Right. It just means I'm being honest. But we're so reluctant to say that we create this boogeyman and we elect him to our Texas Congress, Ted Cruz, and let him speak for us and convince all Texans, meaning all the white ones. You know, we can't let this sneak up into we can't let this show up anywhere. Anytime you hear somebody saying anything about critical race theory, you got to do like this. You got to push them away like they're a vampire. You know, you got to push the bogeyman away. It's painful and it's horrific. And we've got to keep doing this though. We've got to keep letting people know it's not bad to talk about it. It's okay. Our students are afraid to talk about it now. 5 years ago, I mean, we still teach it. And like Dr. Crenshaw said in the video, we still teach it in grad school a little bit, more in the PhD program than the master's program. In the PhD program, every student takes a theory class. And in that theory class, you learn about critical theory and you learn about critical race theory. And 5 years ago, we taught it. No one blinked an eye. It was just, you know, some people got a little squirmy, but it's okay. We kept going. But now, last year when we taught it, people got anxious. Students didn't want to put it in their papers. You know, if I publish a paper with this in my paper, people aren't going to want to hire me. People are going to, you know, they're going to call me names. I'm like, well, that's just part of our history. But we run from it. So this is great, but we got to get this into white circles too. And why white people are so afraid just baffles me.
Right.
Yeah, I think the conversation, nationally has created a cause for people to be uncomfortable or to run away from it or to think of it as a negative thing. And I don't want to have no parts of it. It is a bad thing. But I wonder, as I listen to you talk, I'm thinking about what you're saying, and I wonder two things. I wonder if we were to recognize that guilt in terms of our history when it comes to, oppression and racial injustice and discrimination and all of these things that, unfairness and inequity and all that, if we think about the fact that there is guilt in every ethnic group in this regard, right? Even within the African American community, although, we were subject to these injustices, we also within our own community were contributing to promoting and advancing injustices, right? But not just in our community, or I should say as a whole, when it comes to African American population, but in every ethnic group. We all have our part, right? So there's guilt on it. It's not just, only you all are guilty and we're not, we're the victims.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's a human thing, right? It's not and that's the thing, with race being this construct, this social construct, we take away the human element, the human factor. We're flawed, altogether, right? So when it comes to every ethnic group, there is guilt. There is enough guilt to spread around.
Yeah, it is.
No one is guiltless, right?
That's right.
And so I wonder if that reality, the reality of that was, brought to the forefront. There's no need to, be offended or, to resist the truth or to become upset, or to feel like you have to, defend your group. We are all guilty. We're all guilty in history. We're guilty now too, we all are guilty. So if we start there, will this help us move forward in a more positive way?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's one thought that I had, one thing I wanted to put out there. The other thing that I wanted to put out there is if critical race theory was taken out of the equation, okay, because critical race theory, as we understand it, was to, be used as a lens to look at our laws, right? So if we remove critical race theory out of the equation, it wasn't always there, right? But if we remove it now out of the equation, are we able to vet our laws and policies and regulations with that critical eye, with that critical thought enough to identify and to determine whether or not a law, regulation, policy, whatsoever, a code is going to be oppressive in some way? If we remove, if we just take critical race theory out of the equation, will we take responsibility for doing that? Will we take that posture in our view of laws and policies and codes and such? Will we approach it by saying, will this oppress one or another? And if so, how do we adjust so that it's not oppressing one or another? If critical race theory was taken out of the equation. That's my other thought. And I'll just leave it there.
Rich conversation. I love this. I actually
want to hear from people, see if anybody
yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's talk. Who wants to, anybody else? Thoughts, concerns, ideas?
Well, I would, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
I would offer this, that critical race theory is not a bad thing, and it's not a boogeyman. And to placate and say that if this term offends you, then we'll just remove the term and hope we have the practice. It reminds me of when Trayvon Martin was shot. And then I heard a lot of people saying, well, he never should have had that hood on. And then I thought, and so then people started wearing hoods, but then they started getting shot without the hoods. So I say it's a slippery slope to not make us all as adults and as fellow citizens in society to just stand on our 2 feet and be responsible for reality. I think we do have a painful history. I don't know if I'd say ugly, but we do have a painful history, but we have to believe in one another. You have to believe that if you hurt me, I have the capacity to forgive you and we can move forward together. And we do that not with me making you feel better about the fact that you hurt me, but about us just understanding that brother to brother, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. So I don't want us to get hung up on the term critical race theory, because critical race theory is not a bad thing. And like I say, as a public policy maker, it is my hope and my dream and my prayer that new people, young people coming into the public sphere will engage in critical race theory, and that our policies, our practices, our democracy, our country will become better because of it. What this conversation truly needs to embrace is that we're just not going to let a segment of our society decide what we can say, what we can't say, what we do, what we don't do. Because if we move the needle, it'll just come up with something else. It's not like that's going to fix it. They'll come up with something else. So I think we face it together, unified culturally, and we face it and we just tell them, you push back on it. And that's why I say again for the third time, how insidious it is that this is rising up in our educational world.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Any other comments? I agree.
Yeah, Miss Pat always brings it, and that's why I wanted to invite. That's why I invite people I do, but in particular, Ms. Miller is a champion for McLennan County, and it's an honor to know her, and actually known her. I don't know if I always have little stories to share. Her sister was my 8th grade history teacher. So, and then I got grown and me and her sister lived across from each other. So I've known her for a while, but this is a
That's
great
right, we're family.
Yes, ma'am. In a sense, we are. Miss Bennett was my teacher. She's the one who really told me if I don't study, I'm not going to get a good grade because I didn't want to read history. Any other comments? Any thoughts? This is a good thing today. I'm happy about this conversation because this is what we wanted to happen. We just got to get more people not to be so afraid of it. Think of a critical race theory. We're looking a critical eye at a theory, just looking at it from a critical lens and teaching people how to do that and not make it this big, scary thing that has been politicized. Because as long as I have breath, I'm gonna learn about all history and continue to do that. Let's see. I'm so thankful.
Deborah, do you have anything you would like to share?
Yeah. You're on mute, Deborah.
Okay, there we go. No, I just maybe comments. I don't know how much sharing. I just really appreciate this because I kept hearing critical race theory, and I'm totally ignorant about critical race theory, and I would look it up, like what does what is the definition of critical race theory? And I still wasn't comprehending it. And so when I saw this forum that Trinia posted on Facebook, I thought, oh, this would be a great time to learn. And I really appreciate, looking at race and patterns of equality that have endured. And I thought that was a very good point that Dr. Chevelle made in the beginning. And just hearing different perspectives and that it's okay to talk about these things, and it's been one of those taboo. And I remember being in school, and I went to a predominantly white school growing up. And when it came time for Black History Month, February, everybody was looking at me. Hey, what does Deborah have to share in class today? Or we shouldn't talk about that if we have to talk about slavery, oh, is that going to upset her, And so it's just, I think I took a few notes and everything like that, and we can't frame racism. We have to look at the way that we're framing racism, and it's not against white people, and that's wrong. And it's a way to, a lot of times there's ways to oppress the Black history. And I just hope that out of this conversation, I'll be talking to other people about what we've discussed here today, and educate some people that are ignorant like I was, before being part of this group. So I appreciate y'all so much, and getting more information and becoming more educated about critical race theory. So I appreciate y'all.
That's so good, Deb. Glad you came.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'm glad I saw that post, and I'm like, oh, this would be perfect.
Yes.
Hear about that.
I'm gonna share a story with y'all right quick. I was an undergrad at UMHB, and so it was the time of Barack Obama. Okay, and so the inauguration. So Dr. Gusakuma, who's now I think an adjunct at Baylor, was my professor. And so, he's from Hawaii. So he had the big screen on, he had the inauguration, he made a 3-layer cake. He was so excited. And it was just a great time. But UMHB is predominantly white school, it's Little Baylor. And so I used to wear my Barack Obama t-shirt. So my professor said, hey, Ms. Barack Obama. So we get in class and the professor says, wasn't last night historic? And so you got to remember, I'm like 38, 39, 40. And Stu's like, we don't even want to talk about it. I raised my hand. I was like, we're future social workers. If we can't talk about it, who can? In a strange hush. But my professor, she said, Trina, thank you. She said, I wasn't talking about the race piece of it, just the historic. They didn't even want to talk, so we run and hide. And it's like, why can't we celebrate everyone? Black, white, Asian, Native American. Why can't we celebrate? Dr. Gusakuma was so excited because he's from Hawaii. And I laughed. I was like thinking to myself, and I'm just gonna be honest, I said, these white people hate this, because he had the screen up, he had the cake, he wanted a piece of cake, and people were like, no. So it's been going on forever. And I'm so excited. And Deborah, the whole point of this is so you can get educated and go out and teach. And I was telling Dr. Chevelle, the outcome of this is that we have a clear understanding of one another's perspectives, and then look at the truth and not listen to the media, not listen to left wing or right wing. Read for yourself and find out and dig and look. And so I'm pretty political. And so I look up words and meanings and theories. And so my mind is always going. So I'm so excited. We've had this conversation. Everybody has shown their perspective, and this collectively is what it's going to take. And maybe this will spread throughout our community, throughout the state, and throughout the country, of understanding things on a deeper level. And so we are the professionals. Like Cherie said on our flyer, we don't need expertise. We are the experts of our story. Anything else?
I would like to just add before we close, because I know we're winding things down. as I kind of reflect a little bit on this whole conversation over the hour, what's coming to my mind is a lot of the comments that we're making are, grounded in the fact that we as individuals living in America are revealing our, the extent of our cultural conditioning. We are culturally conditioned, to think certain things, to respond in certain ways. As you mentioned about the, students in your class in terms of, wanting to talk about, whatever happened the night before. And it's like, I don't want to talk about it. Our responses are even influenced by how we've been culturally conditioned. And I think to have a conversation like this, and we've only hit the surface.
Right.
And we've only hit the surface. We hadn't gone deep in this at all. But to have a conversation like this, honestly, and to be, even transparent in our discussing of the conversation, we have to also recognize that we see through a culturally conditioned lens, or we're filtering things through a culturally conditioned lens. In order for us to be able to transition, to shift, to grow, to embrace, to forgive, which I'm so thankful Ms. Pat Miller brought that out, because I think that is so critical. To get to that place, we have to recognize that, we're conditioned in a lot of ways, and how we've been conditioned is influencing how we relate to each other, and even how we understand what we're witnessing and what we're hearing, and how we respond to what we witness and what we're hearing. So I think the misunderstandings, the skewed views that we're getting with regard to critical race theory, and how people are, because it's getting, I've heard about some really ugly things that's happening. When people are gathering to have a conversation, they're fighting, there is, people are, drawing guns, and all kinds of craziness is happening, because of this one topic. And again, part of it is because we don't have an understanding, but another part of it is because of that what we know and what we have embraced, as we've been culturally conditioned. And so I think that we continue the conversation, and this not be the last time we have this discussion, because again, we've only hit the surface, but continue the conversation and dig a little bit deeper into this, and a little bit deeper even means that we examine our own perspective about the matter and how we've responded or how we've reacted to it, and have discussion around it, because again, it has an influence on how we relate to each other. And this is not a black or white thing. This is really just about, human beings coming together and being able to have a discussion to move us forward, as people, as individuals within a community. So that's kind of like my last thought. Let this not be the last time that you kind of mull over these things. Maybe after this, I think Trania is going to be sending some information, some articles and such, that you can continue to review this topic and, consider the different perspectives out there to make sense of it all, and to determine, the position that you have with it. How is it supporting, or how is it promoting your own system of values and beliefs, etc. And then let's come back to the table and let's look at it from a different angle. And I think maybe this idea of forgiving one another might be a good place to start in terms of having a conversation. But let's not stop here. Let's continue to have a conversation, because that's the only way we're going to be able to get, get to that place of overcome is when we continue to engage with one another and continue to have conversation with one another, and not see each other as threat, but recognize each other and embrace each other as who we are. We're humans, and we're human beings on this planet to live together. So with that being said, if you want to know about future meetings, please put your email in the chat if we don't already have it. Put it there, and we'll keep you posted on our next meetings. We meet once a month. So if you would like to attend the next Candid conversation, feel free to put your email there, and we will certainly keep you posted on when that will be, so that we can come together and continue the conversation. Jamie, would you like to say something before we conclude? Oh, she posted. Did you want to expound on what you said or clarify what you're saying?
I like that.
Love it. Yeah.
I like that, Jamie. Did everybody see that? Remember, micro interactions can lead to macro change. Thanks for the safe space. That's pretty good. I like that.
Okay. Jamie, was there anything else you would like to say?
Just piggybacking off of what you said, and what Dr. Singletary, well, really what everybody has said, because it's emotional, and sometimes people do not know why it's emotional, and why you can have trauma that follows you generationally on either side, and or humiliation that can follow. So with the emotions, sometimes it just starts with a micro, and for those who aren't social workers, I'm sorry, I'm getting very social work, but just on a one-on-one or a small interaction in a safe space can really change a person's perspective. So hopefully everybody just goes forth, because I know sometimes when we talk about big things, it can even be intimidating, or you feel overwhelmed, or how will I change? But you do not know when you have 6 or 7 micro interactions, how that can change a macro or social or systemic, make a systemic change. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, everyone, for coming. This has been awesome. We were excited. We were hoping we had a good turnout. We had a great turnout. We had a great conversation. And we're going to continue these conversations as we go into our next month. If you have any questions or concerns, hit us up at, what's our email? I'm gonna put it in.
Yep, CTXABSW @outlook.com.
Yes.
And Miss Sandira, I know you just joined us, but is there something that you would like to share?
Oh, I'm just so impressed. I just got on the tail end, and I do extend my apologies, y'all. Zooming, you get overbooked on this, that, and the other. And I had a morning meeting with the debate squad at the campus. I'm at Texas Southern University. And so we were doing our first greeting and morning retreat with them, but I could not pass this opportunity up to just come over and give a shout out to one of my favorite chapters. So I just thank you all for continuing to the fight and to keeping the conversation going. So please keep me involved, and I'll try to move my schedule a little better. Are y'all normally on Saturdays around this time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'll try to see if I can move things around. But welcome to anybody that's not an NABSW members. We would love to have you join us and to continue the fight. As my president says, liberation is not a spectator sport. You got to jump in. So we would love the opportunity for you all to jump in. As you know, Texas is doing its thing. So we need to keep active. We need to keep pressing and to keep involved with the issues that affect our families and our communities, and of course, those in academia. So thank you for inviting me, and look forward to seeing you all again.
Yes, thank you for joining. Miss Deborah, definitely come back and join us. Dr. Singletary, we love to have you. If you are available, our next meeting, we would love for you to be present. You're always welcome. Like, you don't need
invitation. Yeah, I think he might have signed off. I'm not sure. Is he still here?
Okay. So yes, all of you are always Oh, there he is.
Oh, yeah, he's back on.
I'm still here. No.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. It's an honor. I will plan to be at the next one. I look forward to continuing this conversation and all of your
Good.
hard work.
Yes,
So
thank
meaningful.
you. Miss Lisa, you are welcome always. You have an open invitation. Miss Patricia, open invitation. Is it LaTronda?
LaTronda, yeah. That's Miss Miller's assistant.
Yes, you're always welcome. I remember her face. You're always
Mhm.
welcome. And we will communicate with you all when our next meeting is and what our topic is. But if you have ideas,
Thank you.
for a topic for our next discussion, feel free to share. We're open to that as well. But we definitely want to keep the conversation going. So I have nothing more to share. I think we've run out of time. So thank you all for joining us today. And we hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Take care.
Yeah, take care, man. Up out there, y'all. Man.